why is it that a highly competent adult, like someone who can manage a multi-million-dollar corporate budget? Wait, no, I'm thinking of someone who, you know, raises 3 kids or smoothly navigates all that complex office politics.
Oh, right. Someone who really has their life together.
Exactly. But then that same person completely freezes up and just feels like an absolute failure when they're asked to conjugate a single verb in a new language.
Yeah, it's a completely universal
You
experience.
know the feeling, right? Like
Okay.
you decide you are finally going to learn English. You sit down with this crisp blank notebook. You look at the sheer vastness of the vocabulary, all the contradictory grammar rules, and your brain it just seemingly shuts off.
It is a totally paralyzing moment.
Yeah.
And I mean, it happens to almost everyone. But what we often fail to realize is that this paralysis, it isn't a lack of intelligence or willpower.
Okay.
It's actually a highly specific structural failure in how we approach the acquisition of complex systems.
Well, today we are going to completely dismantle that structure. We're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating series of excerpts from a text called The Architecture of Language Mastery.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is strictly foundational.
Yeah.
So if you're tuning in expecting a breakdown of grammar rules or verb tenses or, the best flashcard algorithms,
You're going to be disappointed.
right, we are pivoting away from that entirely. Instead, we're using this text to decode the psychological blueprint that's actually required to master English.
The underlying foundation.
Exactly. We're looking at the mental architecture and the behavioral science that really has to be established before any actual language learning can successfully take place.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we even get to the mechanics of studying, the hours, the apps, the heavy textbooks, the conversation really has to start exactly where our source material starts.
Right at the very beginning.
Yeah. And the text begins by demanding that you answer a surprisingly simple question.
Yeah.
Why do you want to learn English?
But, and this is key, it doesn't leave it open-ended.
No, it doesn't. It immediately pushes you to define concrete outcomes. Like, it specifically asks if you're doing this to build a better career or to earn more money or to open up, new tangible life opportunities.
Yeah, it treats that why as the load-bearing pillar of your entire cognitive architecture.
That makes sense.
The source makes this really bold claim that when your purpose is absolutely clear and it's tied to a concrete outcome, your motivation becomes structurally sound.
So it stops you from quitting.
Right. It prevents you from giving up when the process inevitably gets difficult, which it will.
I have to admit, though, I kind of want to push back on this framework right out of the gate.
Oh, how so?
Well, insisting that the learning process has to be tied to something as, hyper-specific as earning more money or career advancement, I don't know. It feels incredibly transactional to me.
You think it cheapens it a bit?
Yeah. Isn't a genuine desire to just learn the language enough? I mean, to me, it's kind of like getting into a car. You have the keys, you've got a full tank of gas, and you just want to drive.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Right. Like, do you really need to plug a highly specific, high-stakes destination into the GPS before you even pull out of the driveway? Can't the act of learning just be its own reward?
Well, let's actually follow that car analogy into the reality of behavioral science because it's a good one.
Okay, let's do it.
If you pull out of the driveway without a destination, driving feels great for like the first 20 miles. The sun is shining, the radio is playing.
He's got the windows down.
Exactly. But what happens when you hit a massive traffic jam or a torrential downpour or, you realize you're just driving in circles?
You get frustrated.
Right. And if you don't have a specific destination, a compelling, absolute reason that you must get through that traffic, you're simply going to turn the car around and go back home.
Huh. Okay, I understand the traffic jam analogy, but learning a language isn't just a straight highway. Sometimes you have to circle back to the same grammar rules repeatedly over and over.
Oh, absolutely.
So does the text account for the sheer monotony of that? Or is it just relying on the promise of, a future paycheck to keep you going?
It's actually relying on human neurobiology. See, abstract goals fail under cognitive stress.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Saying, I want to learn English because it sounds beautiful, that's an abstract goal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's located in the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that drains energy the fastest.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So when the text specifically points to building a career, earning more money, or opening life-altering opportunities, it's physically connecting the learning process to deeper survival and status circuits in the brain.
It's giving the effort real-world gravity.
Precisely.
So basically, when I'm completely exhausted after a 9-hour workday and my prefrontal cortex is just totally depleted, the abstract love of the language isn't going to be enough to make me open a textbook.
Exactly. The text states very clearly that you are going to face profound difficulties. When you're struggling to understand a complex grammatical structure, your brain is actively looking for an excuse to conserve energy and just quit.
To shut it down.
Right. But remembering that this specific skill is the literal key to a promotion or to your family's financial security, that totally bypasses that fatigue. That tangible why acts as an anchor.
Okay, so if our brain is actively trying to conserve energy and like shut down the learning process,
Yeah.
when does that metabolic depletion actually hit? Because I feel like that dictates the whole timeline we're working with here.
And that brings us perfectly to the source's core metaphor, which maps out the exact timeline and the emotional arc of the learner.
Right, the marathon.
Exactly. The text states it plainly. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint.
And it maps out a very predictable biological response. It says that at first the learning feels easy, but later you will inevitably feel tired or frustrated. And honestly, the part that stood out to me the most in the text is the follow-up sentence. It simply says, "That's normal."
What's fascinating here is how the text actively normalizes cognitive fatigue. I mean, it frames exhaustion not as a personal failure.
Right, not like you're just lazy.
Exactly. It frames it as an expected physiological response to building new neural pathways in your brain.
Which completely changes the paradigm. I mean, we are so used to what I call the New Year's gym resolution trap.
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
You know the cycle. It's January 1st, you buy the expensive running shoes, you sign up for the premium gym, and you just sprint.
You go all out.
You go every single day for 2 weeks, and it feels amazing. The endorphins are flowing. It quote-unquote feels easy, just like the text describes the start of learning English.
But then
February hits. You miss a day. You get frustrated. You feel incredibly guilty for slowing down, and because of that guilt, you just stop entirely. You burn out because you treated a marathon like a 100-meter dash.
And the neuroscience behind that gym trap directly applies to language acquisition.
It does.
Yeah. In the beginning, the sheer novelty of learning something new floods your brain with dopamine. And dopamine acts as a painkiller and a stimulant.
Oh, so that's why it feels easy at first.
Exactly. But novelty always wears off. And when the dopamine drops, you are left with the brutal metabolic reality of neuroplasticity.
Building the actual brain connections.
Right. Forging new connections in the brain requires immense physical energy. Your brain makes you feel tired and frustrated as a defense mechanism to stop you from burning calories.
So the text telling us that feeling tired is normal is actually giving us permission to just stop fighting our own biology.
That's spot on. By explicitly telling the learner that frustration is an expected part of the architecture, the TAC neutralizes the guilt.
It totally shifts the metric.
Yes. It shifts the entire metric of success. You are no longer measuring success by how fast you are learning, but by your sheer consistency.
Right, because the text explicitly says, what matters is consistency. Even if you go slowly, as long as you keep moving, you will reach your goal.
Exactly.
But this raises a really practical issue for me. If I know my brain is going to actively try to shut down my language learning to save energy, and I hit that inevitable wall of exhaustion in February, how do I actually keep moving?
Right, what's the engine?
Yeah, what is the mechanism that keeps my feet moving when the novelty dopamine is totally gone?
Well, you have to engineer your own momentum, and the source provides a very specific strategy for this.
Okay.
It instructs the learner to break the English language down into small, simple steps. The exact phrasing is to build small wins every day.
I need to challenge this, honestly, because
Yeah.
when I read small, simple steps, it sounds agonizingly slow.
It does sound slow, yeah.
I mean, we are talking about mastering an entire language.
Stop.
Tens of thousands of words, complex syntax, idioms.
It's a massive undertaking.
If I'm trying to climb a massive mountain, taking it one tiny, shuffling step at a time feels like it will take 3 lifetimes. Does the source really suggest we can reach complete fluency by just taking tiny steps?
Let's examine your mountain analogy through the lens of cognitive load theory.
Okay, I'm listening.
If you stand at the bottom of a massive mountain and you stare directly at the peak, which in this case is complete English fluency,
Yeah.
what happens to your nervous system?
Well, you get overwhelmed. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is just too large, so you freeze up.
Right. Your amygdala perceives that massive gap as a literal threat because the cognitive load required to bridge it is incalculable.
It just shorts out.
Your brain's threat response kicks in and says, that is impossible. Do not expend energy attempting it.
Wow.
But if you refuse to look at the peak and instead you only focus on the next 3 feet of rock directly in front of your face, you completely bypass the amygdala's threat response.
Oh, because anyone can climb 3 feet. The brain doesn't perceive 3 feet as a metabolic threat.
Precisely. And here is the underlying mechanism the text is leveraging. The goal of the small step isn't actually about making massive spatial progress up the mountain.
Wait, it isn't?
No, it's not about memorizing 50 words today instead of 5. The true purpose of the small daily win is to manufacture neurochemical fuel.
Oh, because the text specifically mentions that these small achievements generate confidence.
Yes, and that confidence is basically the psychological translation of a localized dopamine loop.
Okay, break that down for me.
When you achieve a small, highly defined win like, say, successfully ordering a coffee in English, or finally mastering one specific verb tense, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine.
And dopamine is the reward chemical.
It's more than that. Dopamine isn't just a reward chemical. It is literally the molecule of motivation and forward drive.
Oh, wow.
So you aren't taking small steps just to cover distance. You're taking small steps to synthesize the exact neurochemical fuel required to take the next step.
So you're engineering the fuel you need by keeping the daily demands incredibly low, which naturally leads us to what is likely the most countercultural revelation in this entire source material.
Oh, definitely.
Because if we are just manufacturing these little hits of dopamine every day through tiny steps, what does the actual daily routine of a language learner look like? Because it sounds completely different from how we are traditionally taught to study.
It directly challenges the deeply ingrained societal myth of the grind.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that if you aren't suffering, you aren't truly learning.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. If you ask the average person how to master a language, they will tell you to lock yourself in a quiet room, stare at a textbook until your eyes bleed, and study for like 4 to 5 hours a day.
Which is awful.
But the text gives us a radically different mandate. It simply says, keep balance.
2 words that completely upend traditional academic advice.
Yeah, the text explicitly tells you you don't need to study for hours every day. Instead, it instructs you to make learning simple and enjoyable.
And it makes a massive promise attached to that.
It does. It promises that if you do this, over time, your daily efforts will create results beyond your imagination.
Let's look at why studying for 5 hours a day actually fails, mechanically speaking.
Okay.
It really comes down to memory consolidation and cognitive saturation.
You know, it makes me think of trying to keep a houseplant alive.
Ooh, I like this. Go on.
Like, if you want a houseplant to thrive, you give it a small amount of water every day, the soil absorbs it, the roots process it, and the plant grows.
Right.
But if you take a 5-gallon bucket of water and just dump it all over the plant at once, which is basically the equivalent of a 6-hour Sunday study binge, you don't make the plant grow faster. You just drown the roots, wash away the topsoil, and ultimately you kill the plant.
That is an incredibly accurate representation of what happens in your working memory.
Really?
Yeah. Your brain has a strict capacity for how much new information it can hold at one time. When you study for hours on end, you hit cognitive saturation very quickly.
The bucket overflows.
Exactly. The law of diminishing returns kicks in. By hour 3, you might be staring at the page, but your brain is no longer moving information from short-term working memory into long-term storage.
Yeah.
You are literally just drowning the roots.
So the sheer act of forcing yourself to stare at a book doesn't actually equate to learning.
Not at all. In fact, memory consolidation, the actual physical thickening of neural pathways, which is a process called myelination that mostly happens when you are off task.
Wait, when you're not studying?
Yes, it happens during sleep, during rest, and during periods of balance. When the text instructs you to keep learning simple and balanced, it is aligning your study habits with how the brain organically processes and stores data.
That's incredible. So the true architecture of mastery isn't about agonizing, painful, hard work. It is entirely about biological sustainability.
Exactly.
The text promises unimaginable results, but it is very careful to state that those results do not come from binge studying. They are the cumulative product of a patient, balanced daily habit.
It requires a profound shift in how you view yourself. I mean, you have to stop viewing yourself as a computer hard drive that can just download gigabytes of data if left plugged in long enough.
Right, we aren't machines.
No, we aren't.
Yeah.
You have to start viewing yourself as an organic system that requires cycles of stress and rest to adapt.
Yeah.
When you make the learning simple and when you keep it balanced, you remove the neurological friction. And when the friction is gone, the consistency that the marathon requires, it finally becomes sustainable.
Okay, let's look at the complete architectural blueprint we've extracted from the text today, because the structure really relies on 4 distinct pillars.
Let's recap them.
First, we have to start by defining a highly concrete, tangible why. We can't rely on just the abstract love of a language. We need an outcome tied to our real-world status or survival to anchor us when our brain tries to conserve energy.
Right. And second, we have to accept the biological reality of the timeline.
The marathon.
It is a marathon. The early dopamine will fade, the metabolic fatigue will set in, and we have to remember that feeling tired is a normal physiological response, not a sign that we should quit.
Yeah. Third, we engineer our own momentum by breaking the overwhelming cognitive load into tiny, simple steps. We bypass the brain's threat response by focusing only on the next 3 feet in front of us.
Exactly, manufacturing the dopamine we need to keep moving through bite-sized daily achievements.
And finally, we embrace balance over burnout. We throw away the myth of the agonizing grind. We water the plant a little bit every day instead of drowning our working memory, totally trusting the text's promise that simple, balanced daily efforts will eventually consolidate into long-term mastery.
Which brings us to a final kind of structural question for you, the listener, to consider as you process this blueprint today.
Ooh, I like this.
The text guarantees that your daily efforts will create results beyond your imagination, provided the process remains balanced, simple, and consistent. So, if true language mastery doesn't actually require grueling, hours-long daily study sessions, how does this completely change the way you view your own perceived lack of time?
Oh, wow. Because we use "I'm too busy" as our primary defense mechanism.
Exactly. We all do. But if all it takes is a small, simple step to bypass the amygdala and generate the fuel of confidence, what step could you make so incredibly small today that it feels biologically impossible to skip?
I mean, if the mountain is just a series of 3-foot climbs, there is absolutely no architectural reason not to take the first step.
Not at all.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you are staring at that crisp, blank first page of a new notebook and you feel that wave of overwhelm creeping in, just remember the blueprint. You don't have to build the whole house today.
Just lay one brick.
You just have to lay one brick, keep it balanced, keep moving, and we'll see you next time.